In today's video, we're going to look at drawing flowers and how to get that tricky perspective correct. Now, so many of you have told me how you struggle with getting perspective right on flowers. So I've been out in my garden. I've actually been photographing some hollyhocks and some of their leaves. And today I'm going to give you 4 examples of how I go about getting the perspective and the shapes correct on flowers and leaves when they're turned in all sorts of freaky, strange directions. Now, first of all, let me apologize for there being no video last week. I had a lovely holiday in Egypt. I bought a new cat statue. It's actually real stone, and my thought at first was to replace the one that I had, which is a fake one, but actually I like them both, so I'm going to keep them both. Why not? Can never have too many black cats. Unfortunately, after my fantastic holiday, I then got the COVID and I've been quite unwell. I'm trying to get back to normal. It's a slow road. I'm still feeling a little tired. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these. Now, what I advise you to do when you're drawing is to accept that you're going to be, sketchy, you're going to get things wrong. It's not a reasonable assumption to believe that you can just get things right first time, because even professional artists don't. And so by that token, what you need to do when you're sketching is not press too hard and to use a fairly light pencil. Now, I will not be doing that today. I'm going to be using an 8B and it's quite blunt, so it's going to be a great big thick old black line. This is just so that you can see on camera, but just understand that when you're drawing yourself, you should work a little lighter. So we're going to look at this flower first. Let's put it the right way up. Now, let's think about what your brain expects when you draw a flower, because we're always fighting when we're drawing with what our brain expects to see and what we actually see. So your brain expects a hollyhock flower to be circular and the center to be in the middle of the flower. We know that's how it is, but unlike the Egyptians who drew flat perspective, and I saw lots of exciting artwork while I was away. Let me know if you want me to do any of that on the channel. Unlike the Egyptians, we want to get perspective. We want to get something that looks natural. So we're going to look at those 2 things that our brain expects to see. So our brain expects to see a circle and then a center dead bang in the middle. So if we can look at those 2 things, then we can start to see how things really are, not how our brain expects them to be. So the first thing I want to look at with this flower is the outside shape. Now, I think you can see that it sort of curves this side. Look at this side here, though. It's much straighter. So what we can do is we can draw the outside shape first to give us a bit of a guideline. Now, angles remain the same. And so what I can do is line my picture up with the side of the paper. We can't test an angle by, having stuff all over the place. We need to put this here. And I can look at the angle of that straight edge there and sort of bring it down a little bit. Now, of course, this isn't exact, but it's giving me a rough idea of the shape of this flower. And now just by eye, and any of this can be adjusted later, I'm just going to get a bit of an idea of how I think this looks. Now, of course, there is all sorts of other stuff going on here. It's not an exact straight line, but we're beginning to get an idea of the shape of the flower. Now, the next thing we need to do is see where the center is. So the center of the flower is here. And if my straight line is here, then here's my center. We could also ask ourselves, is it closer to this edge or this edge? It looks about halfway, but I can actually measure that, and I don't need a tape measure. I'm just going to take a measurement here and take a measurement here. So this side is a little bit shorter, only a touch. So I can find the halfway point and just come this way a little bit here. And then this is going to give me kind of an idea of where the center is. Now from here, it becomes much easier. I can start looking at where the shapes of those petals are. We have this one here, and I can start bringing this out. And at this stage, all you're looking at, and we want to get this sort of line here as well, all you're looking at this stage is just a rough idea of how the flower looks. We've got another petal that comes around behind and then becomes this one here. It's quite hard to see sometimes in hollyhocks where the separation of the petals is. I can see another one about here. and just starting to get this idea. Everything needs to come back to the center, remember? And what we've got with Hollyhocks is we've got these little sort of almost like pointed teardrop shapes, almost like arches, and they're formed actually by the gaps between the petals. Now from here I would take this on and I would look at each petal much more carefully, and I would start sort of saying to myself, well, you know, what's the actual shape of this? I'd be working much lighter than this so I can easily erase the bits that I don't need, and start looking at exactly what shape each petal is, and in this way I'll get an accurate drawing. Let's look now at a more extreme viewpoint. We're going to do something similar with this one. This is right on the side, growing out from the stem. Forgive the weird colours in these photographs. I have actually put a montage of these photos together. I'll drop it in my Facebook group. Just follow the instructions in the description of this video if you'd like to download that so you can practice these yourself. But unfortunately my printer is just, it's appalling at the moment. I cannot seem to get it working properly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually start with this stem because it's giving me something sort of I can measure an angle at. So the stem slightly goes over to the right. So let's give ourselves that idea there. We also want to think about what shape this is. Now this one is much more sort of triangular. You see this side here is again very, very flat. And then we've got this sort of curving out from here. Everything comes back to this stem here. So let's put another side in the stem. And then I'll start getting that, again, that very rough idea of shape. And we've got this sort of shape coming out here. We know where the center is because it's just in from that stem. So it's here somewhere. We curve round and then we're pretty straight as we come down here. And here's my rough underdrawing. Now you see this area here where the petals are curving round. That's a distinct line that I can start to put in. It comes like this. And then from there, again, we're looking at taking all of these petals outwards, and I'm looking for those areas where petals join. This one again curves round. We've got some more sort of folded edges here. We've got a distinct petal line here, which comes quite close. And I'm looking now, I think this now needs to come more up here. So I would erase this line here. As I said, I'm just doing this very dark for you, leaving all my mistakes in so that you can see the process. And then we've got these lines that come out like this. And again, here is my very rough version of how this flower looks. And from there, again, I would go in and I'd put all of these other things in. I've got some idea of bits of leaf coming in here as well. And I'll just work on adjusting that and popping in things like buds until I get everything a little bit more precise. Just before we carry on, could I just quickly ask you if you wouldn't mind pressing the like button on this video? I know all of us YouTubers ask you to do this, but it's so important for my channel. If you can like, or better still, subscribe to the channel, it's completely free. Share the video or leave me a comment. All of these things help my little channel to grow. I'm so grateful to all of you who watch me here on YouTube. Now let's get back to today's video. Let's give ourselves another challenge and let's look at a leaf like this. Now again, your brain has the idea that a leaf comes from a stem and that it comes out in a symmetrical shape from there. But of course, this one's completely different. We're looking at it from the top. We can also see some of the underneath, and we've got the stem here. Now the stem, we know, must go to this center point here, and yet it's covered by the leaf. But this is where I would start, because you must make sure when you're drawing flowers and leaves that everything comes from the center point, and that stems that go towards a flower, even if they're obscured in places, actually meet that flower or the start of that leaf, so that we get an overall look of realism. It's very easy for people to draw a leaf like this and then pop a stem in, and if you were to continue that line forward, you find it goes nowhere near the point where it's meant to be reaching. So I would start with this as a beginning point. Again, I'm going to look for an angle here. So I've got a rough angle like this. And I'd almost draw through this part here to start with, because that part's not important. We don't want to just hope that our stem meets this. We can just cover the stem later on. So we're going to take the stem right up to here. What I'm looking for now are these veins. So rather than trying to draw the outside shape, and believe me, humans are not good at doing this. You'll almost certainly go wrong if you try and just draw the outside shape of the leaf. What we're going to do is we're going to look for the leaf skeleton, as it were, for its veins. So I've got one long one here, I've got shorter ones here. I can see the direction that they go in. First of all, I've got one that comes up like this, and then I've got a longer one that goes here, one that comes more this way. The longest one is a bit like this, and I'll continue putting those in. Now I'm going to look for the actual outside shape. Again, we've got angles, we've got things that line up here. Do you see this line between these 2 points here? That's something that I could put in, and it's a fair way down the stem. So we could do something like this, put a guideline in, and from there I could think about getting those shapes in. I've gone a little further down there. Let's think now about coming round past that stem. So eventually we would erase this part here, and of course we'd also erase any guidelines. When I think about what shapes I've got here, I've got something very narrow, got a little curve here. If possible, try to look at them as abstract shapes. Get your brain away from thinking about it actually being a leaf, because as soon as your brain thinks about it being a leaf, you're going to want to make something that's much more traditional leaf shaped, even though that may not really be what you're looking at. And we can start to shape our leaf around that leaf skeleton. So again, I've got a rough idea of what the leaf might look like here. And now it's incumbent on me to start actually getting those shapes in a little bit more, putting this stem in more properly and starting to get these shapes in as I start to define and adjust my leaf. Now, some of you may have been watching the Sunday masterclass videos. I'm actually thinking of painting some hollyhocks next, so let me know if you're interested in seeing that in more detail. But finally, in this video, let's look at the tricky difficulty of getting two subjects, both with perspective, actually quite close to each other. So there's a relation to these objects. We can find lines between them. We can find angles between the center and things like that. I also want to be looking overall at what sort of shape this would fit into. It's almost a rectangle, isn't it? We could almost square it off like this, or would that be a parallelogram? I don't know. I'm not great at maths, but I'm just thinking about this idea of a box shape. I'll have to do this one a little smaller to fit on my picture here. So the first thing I can think about with this, we've got a box to put it in, but which one takes up the most room? It's easy to look, think, well, the leaf is bigger or the flower is bigger. We don't really know. So let's think about this point to this point here. Which one takes up the most room? So I've got my flower here. Here I've got my leaf, which is about 1.5 times as long. So that's a metric that we can take. We can take this box that we've drawn and sort of put a line across. Say to ourselves, well, the flower will go here and then we'll put the leaf up there. Just going to check that angle again. In fact, I think it's a little bit more like this. So let's think about placing that center point in for the flower, because it's right over to one side, isn't it? In fact, I think I'll just get a vague idea of the shape first of all. Pretty much comes down like this. And it's being pushed unnaturally into that straight edge because the leaf is pressing on it. But what about this center point? Now this part here grows out, but what about the center point? It's here. So again, I can ask myself which side it's closest to, and it's certainly closest to this top edge. So let's pop in a mark for a center point here, and I'll start to get just a rough idea of how this is structured. So we've got a little bit petal down there and then coming up down here. I can see that I have one petal coming this way, and then I think we have another coming up to about here. I've got a petal here coming out from that center point. Remember that each of these must come out from the center point. So there's no point me starting to draw the edge of a petal here. It must come out from the center, so you can always draw through things. Again, I'll leave defining that edge until later on and I know exactly what I've got going on. So here's a rough idea of where the flower is. Now let's place the leaf. So what I want to do particularly is to know where this center point here is. So I'm probably going to try and find an angle between this and this. So again, when you want an angle, you want to line your picture up with the edge of your paper. Doesn't matter if that's the top edge, the bottom, the left, the right, as long as you're squaring it off. And then I can put an angle like this and see what the relationship is between these two things. So I've got something like this going on, because if we took a straight edge across like this, we would see that this is higher than the flower center, which we've got happening here. So I'm going to put the center in there for my leaf, and then again I'm going to look for those veins that come out. I've got one coming up like this. Also important to get the right curve on those veins. This one curves down like this. Got one that comes along here, almost follows the edge of that flower. And then I have another one that comes up like this. And then I can start to look at the shape of the leaf itself. Very sort of wiggly edge, which again we can define much better later on. For now, we'll just put a rough idea of it in. It's always important to get the shapes and the layout correct before you put any detail at all in your leaves. So here I'm just looking for rough shapes as I come around the top here. Again, we've got a straightness to this. So I can bring this other side of the leaf round here. The point is going to be in line with that leaf spoke that I've got there. There's a slight folding here as we come round here like so. And here we are. I have my rough guideline for my flower and my leaf. The angles and the proportion are correct. Of course, there's a lot more work to do, but I hope you can see the process of analysing the size and the shape of things, and above all, overriding any preconceived ideas that your brain has of how things look. So do let me know in the comments if you found this video helpful. Perhaps there are some other flowers you would like me to draw with you. I know there's a huge interest on this channel in drawing. Perhaps there are some other subjects that you would like me to cover in drawing as well. And before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the video description. There's lots of free downloadables and other free stuff down there for you, even a free course that you can take. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you're going to really enjoy the video that I made about flower drawing mistakes. You can watch that video right now.